Welcome to WHRO's Weekly Edition. I'm Jordan Christie.
And I'm Barry Graham.
We highlight the week's news and stories happening all over Hampton Roads. In this week's program, Norfolk celebrated MLK Day and along with it held a ceremony for a state historical marker placed at the longstanding Attucks Theater on Church Street.
Virginia Attorney General Jay Jones revoked the office's previous position that supported Virginia Beach's old citywide voting system.
And a good book is one of life's great luxuries. A Chesapeake store focuses on romance books of all types, as the genre has seen a boom among readers in recent years.
Because they're really building those community networks and roots, it makes me hopeful that the stores can have longevity.
It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. This week, Norfolk celebrated the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. WHRO's John Doucette reports the city also commemorated a milestone for the historic Attucks Theater.
Officials and citizens gathered outside the theater Monday to dedicate a state historical marker recognizing the long life of the Attucks Theater. The Attucks was designed and built by and for the African American community in 1919 and operated during segregated times as an important community venue into the mid-1950s. Years of efforts to restore it led to its reopening in 2004. Charles Johnson Jr. was part of the organization that helped renovate the theater. He says the Attucks is living history.
When we see a building like this being used by a community with its original objectives, that tells you that history is important. It's important for all of us.
After the dedication, the community filled the theater for a celebration of King's legacy. John Doucette, WHRO News.
Intrepid volunteers trek into the Great Dismal Swamp each winter to count all the birds they can find. WHRO's Catherine Hefner takes us there.
Laura May fell in love with birds years ago, and now she's always on the lookout.
I bird morning, noon, and night. I dream about birds.
For the past decade, she's also participated in the annual Christmas bird count. It's a more than century-old national tradition led by the Audubon Society. Last month, May and 24 other volunteers rose before dawn and braved rain and snow to count birds in and around the Dismal Swamp.
The data is very important and used by scientists and students to understand what's happening to our world and to the birds.
The group found 21,000 birds from 77 species. Robins, grackles, and cowbirds were the most common. They also spotted a bobcat. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Construction on a Norwegian defense contractor's missile factory in James City County will start by mid-year. WHRO's Nick McNamara says the first munitions are expected to roll out by 2028.
Kongsberg Defense and Aerospace Incorporated's 150,000 square foot plant will employ at least 180 people and manufacture two types of cruise missiles to sell to the U.S. military. James City County's proximity to several military installations and the quickly growing Port of Virginia made it stand out among competitors. County leaders expect the jobs and Kongsberg's $100 million investment to be a boon for the locality. It will also be the first tenant of a more than 2 million square foot industrial park. Significant work will be necessary to get the site ready for Kongsberg and other tenants. Lovett Industrial, the center's Houston-based developer, is gearing up for major road, utilities, and drainage upgrades at the largely rural site. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
100 years ago, pianos were a fixture in many American homes. More than 300,000 of them were sold in 1925, but today the number has fallen to under 18,000. Electric keyboard sales outnumber acoustics 10-1.
They're cheaper and easier to maintain, but one man in Virginia says he still keeps busy ensuring existing instruments, which can last 100 years or more, stay in tune. WVTF's Sandy Hausman spoke with him and filed this report.
David Weiss has been playing the piano since he was a kid. For a time after college, he performed for a living. But it wasn't easy.
You get a little beat up. You're working weekends, evenings, often the remuneration isn't great.
Then someone loaned him a book about how the piano actually works.
I picked this book up and I read it like 3 times, cover to cover. Man, it was a piano rebuilding shop not too far where I was living, and I started working there. And then eventually I spent a year at a piano technology school up in Canada.
Today, he's one of perhaps a dozen professional piano tuners in Central Virginia. able to adjust thousands of moving parts.
When I'm tuning a piano, I'm adjusting the tension on 220 strings or so in a very specific order. I can take a guitar or violin, there's a little peg, I can turn it with my fingers, it's easy. On a piano, there's so much tension on the strings that you need a lever 9 or 10 or 12 inches long to get enough force to even turn it.
And then there are the pedals.
If I play a note, a piece of felt hits the string and stops the note. I'll demonstrate. It shuts off. If I put the right pedal down, it rings on.
There is computer software available to help with tuning, and gadgets that replace a traditional and cumbersome tuning fork.
You need 3 hands to operate it because you have to play a note, you have to turn the lever, and you have to hit the tuning fork at the same time. So most people, even if they're tuning completely by ear, they're using an electronic. You just need one note to get started, and then you build your tuning from there.
But there's no exact standard for tuning because every piano is different.
It's wood, leather, and felt, and you just can't make everyone the same. If you went to Steinway Hall right now and you walked into their showroom, there could be 5 Steinway Ds. That's their flagship piano. The retail price might be like $200,000. And if you sat down and played all 5, they'd all be vastly different. And the other complication is pianos are so at the whim of humidity fluctuations that you can have a piano perfect at 2 o'clock and at 4 o'clock it's changed.
Which is why anytime a concert pianist comes to Charlottesville, a piano technician like David Weiss gets a call.
They might fly in, and immediately they'll go to the piano and play for 3 or 4 hours. And then they'll walk out, and you'll be waiting there, and they'll have a list. And typically it's things like, this note doesn't sustain as well as its neighbor, or when I push this note down, it sounds a little thin, or the pedal doesn't give me exactly what I'm looking for.
Concert halls aside, many schools, churches, restaurants, hotels, recording studios, and serious musicians have acoustic pianos. So many that Weiss contends there's a shortage of tuners. He often worked more than 40 hours a week. Now he's in the process of retiring, but his son is in the business, confident there will always be a place for this instrument like no other.
The piano's kind of a whole orchestra in one instrument. The low notes, the high notes, and you can play every kind of music. If you're a beginning student, everything is laid out. There's C, D, it just follows the alphabet. You can learn that at the first lesson.
And while artificial intelligence may assist piano tuners, Weiss says the human being will always play a central role. He has carried 8 bags filled with the tools needed to repair and maintain 5,000 moving parts in an average acoustic piano. I'm Sandy Hausman.
Still ahead on Weekly Edition, federal job losses tied to the Department of Government Efficiency wiped out 6 years of previous gains. But first, last weekend, Abigail Spanberger was inaugurated as Virginia's 75th governor. WVTF's Michael Pope was there and has this report about her inaugural address.
Abigail Ann Davis Spanberger used her inaugural address to call for unity, casting herself as a kind of alternative to President Donald Trump. She never said his name, but the implications were clear.
Our hard-working, law-abiding immigrant neighbors will know that when we say that we will focus on the security and safety of all of our neighbors, we mean them too.
Spanberger ran through the history of the suffragist movement and talked about the importance of a peaceful transfer of power. Spanberger has another major speech Monday afternoon to a joint assembly of the House and Senate. I'm Michael Pope.
Last week also marked the end of Glenn Youngkin's term as governor. Chad Khalil from VPM News was in attendance as Youngkin delivered his final State of the Commonwealth address.
Standing in front of the Virginia House and Senate for the last time, Youngkin's farewell address was a bit of a paradox.
Virginia is stronger than she has ever been.
He ran through a list of what he called wins.
Economic development machine, public-private parent choice model for early education, record business investment, healthy rivers and streams to healthy moms and healthy babies.
But at the same time, he painted those successes as somewhat fragile, and he cautioned the new Democratic trifecta.
Cooperate with our federal partners and the Trump administration, joining Reggie. It's a bad deal, parents. matter. No amendments, no reforms, and no changes.
Virginia House Speaker Don Scott spoke to the press afterwards.
We expected him to give us a little bit of a lecture tonight, and that's his prerogative as governor, and he's leaving. Unfortunately, his political instincts have not been good in the last 2 cycles. Why would we take his advice?
On Saturday, the Commonwealth inaugurates new Democratic Governor Abigail Spanberger. Jad Khalil, VPM News.
On his first day in office, Virginia Attorney General Jay Jones revoked the office's previous opinion supporting Virginia Beach's old citywide voting system. WHO's Michelle Hankerson fills us in.
Jones withdrew the opinion of former Republican AG Jason Miyares. The action doesn't change anything for Virginia Beach, which is fully committed to a district-based voting system for several elections. 53% of voters in the city also supported the system in a 2025 referendum. In a press release, Jones wrote his office would work to ensure Virginia Beach residents are supported in their effort to maintain the current voting system. Michelle Hankerson, WHRO News.
Virginia's 2026 General Assembly session kicked off last week, and Democrats are emphasizing affordability. We kick it back to VPM's Chad Khalil as he reports they first want to pass 4 constitutional amendments.
The amendments would ensure voting rights for the formerly incarcerated and enshrine marriage equality and abortion access. Another would allow for mid-decade redistricting in response to a series of Republican-initiated partisan gerrymanders nationwide. Delegate Sia Price is chair of the House Privileges and Elections Committee. The Newport News Democrat said before the party gets to lowering costs, they should pass the redistricting amendment.
We must first address protecting our democracy and Virginians' freedoms.
Delegate Israel O'Quinn, a Republican representing Washington County, opposed changing Virginia's current process. An independent commission draws maps once every 10 years.
It concerns me that we're attempting to go back to the bad old days of gerrymandering.
Both chambers are expected to complete their actions on the 4 amendments by Friday. Then they could go to voters in April. Jad Khalil, VPM News.
Local businessman Virgil Thornton took his seat in the General Assembly this week as one of the freshman Democratic lawmakers. He's in Richmond to represent the 86th House of Delegates district, which includes Poquoson and parts of Hampton and York County. VPM's Kiris Mansonaris spoke with Thornton at his home in Hampton about priorities for this legislative session.
Top priority for me, and of course even in coming to Richmond, is the 3 amendments: reproductive rights, voting rights, and marriage rights. Because by us having the majority now, we can all work as a team to try to get that across the finish line as far as those amendments onto the Constitution. Of course, the process of first getting it on the ballot. Also, another priority of mine is getting the minimum wage up to that $15 over time. So those are definitely high priorities for me in Richmond.
In line with your priorities for the amendments, where do you stand on redistricting?
That is a big concern. And of course, I'd stand in line with the Speaker. It's no secret that those are things that were happening around the country, basically spearheaded by our president. And here in Virginia, we're going to do what's necessary to level the playing field. So I'm definitely in support of it.
What do you think has really prepared you for the role of delegate?
It actually brings me to a scripture of mine. I got to use it, and that's Romans 8:28, and it says that all things work together for good. So all of the things in our background, from working in the automotive industry, working at the shipyard, working with at-risk children, all of those have prepared me to address the needs of the community. I just love knocking doors because you talk to the constituents, eyeball to eyeballs, what are the issues that are going on? And with her, it was affordable health care because I told her that was on my platform, part of my triangle, and she started crying. And I didn't understand why. And then she got herself together and she said, hey, we're selling our personal heirlooms because the medication that I have to get for my husband, who we recently found out have 4-stage cancer, we can't afford it, even with this insurance we have. So she's selling these things for his medication. And that hits hard. So yes, I want to go to Richmond to help out families like that. And then of course I get to see firsthand what it's like to have an underserved community where you have to go outside your community to get health care. So part of my platform is to bring in clinics and things of that nature into neighborhoods that are marginalized that don't have access to health care. And of course, things like that help bring the cost of health care down.
What will be your guiding principles when deciding on funding, and what should be taken in account?
When I think about my trifecta as far as my triangle with healthcare, affordability, also with our economy and growing it, and also with our education, I've been asked before, of the three, what is the most important? And same thing with the budget for me, the most important of those things that center around healthcare. Because if you're not healthy, it doesn't matter about education. If you're not healthy, it doesn't matter about the economy because you're not going to go to work. So my goal is to go to Richmond and advocate for those things that have to fill those holes, because it's going to be difficult as far as some of the programs. We just don't have enough money to fill all the gaps because of the federal cuts. Some programs will get some funding, some programs may not get any funding.
That was Delegate Virgil Thornton, who represents Poquoson and parts of Hampton and York County in the Virginia House of Delegates. Efforts to remove vulgar merchandise from displays seem to be paying off in Virginia Beach's resort area. WHRO's John Doucette has more on the ongoing dispute.
This past week, Atlantic Avenue had a different look. It's the off-season, of course, but most shirts and merchandise with cursing or R-rated humor can no longer be seen from the street. It was different in August. City Council asked resort leaders to encourage voluntary removal of potentially offensive items. Councilmember Worth Remick says what can be seen from the street matters.
They can sell them and put them on display inside their shop, but not visible from the outside. And we think it's working.
Vice Mayor Rosemary Wilson says she's been told landlords are also limiting display items.
And so that the owners have actually put conditions in place for their tenants that they have to run a clean shop, so to speak.
Officials hope it continues when tourists arrive. John Doucette, WHRO News.
Federal job losses tied to the Department of Government Efficiency wiped out 6 years of Virginia's federal job gains in just 11 months last year. The Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO's Kunle Falayi reports.
Virginia lost more than 24,000 federal civilian jobs in 2025, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics data. It is 4 times higher than the combined net job losses of the past 2 decades. Company layoffs added to the pain. Nearly 7,000 Virginia workers were cut last year, a 70% jump from 2024. Economist Bob McNabb of Old Dominion University says the impact is magnified because federal workers earn far more than private sector employees.
Virginia losing 23,500 federal government jobs last year is roughly the equivalent of losing 47,000 private sector jobs.
Northern Virginia, home to more than half of the state's federal workforce, bore the brunt of the cuts. Executive Director of UVA's Weldon Cooper Center, Eric Scosone, says military spending may soften the blow. McNabb said it may not be enough to offset the losses. Already, experts say the job losses have helped knock Virginia off its perch as the nation's #1 state for business. Kunle Falayi, the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO.
Talking about death is something many Americans avoid. But as WHRO's health reporter Yi-Ching Wang reports, a growing group of death doulas in Hampton Roads is trying to change that.
Like birth doulas at the beginning of life, death doulas offer non-medical support at the end, such as advanced care planning and emotional guidance. Williamsburg-based doula Crystal Shear says their work often begins months before hospice, including for patients still pursuing treatment. But she says major barriers remain for their practices, starting with a lack of public awareness.
Death is not a clinical experience. It's a very communal experience, except the community is not talking about death and dying.
Cost is another obstacle. Most death doula services are private pay and not covered by insurance. They've formed a statewide collective and are pushing legislators to recognize end-of-life doula services as part of reimbursable medical care. Yi-Ching Wang, WHRO News.
A Chesapeake romance bookstore created a guide to help readers find their next literary crush. Readers from as far as Australia wanted a copy. WHRO business reporter Toby Cox says the guide's popularity is a window into a billion-dollar industry, and Hampton Roads' slice of it.
Megan Galt shelves books at Novel Grounds, an indie romance bookstore in Chesapeake. But she's not organizing them like a Barnes & Noble would.
Our wall over here is our dark romance. So we have our mafia, our questionable morals. Our other side, it's got your sports, it's got your warm and fuzzies,
Her store is oriented around these romance tropes, shorthands for subcategories or specific story elements that draw people in. She says the shelving method helps readers sift through options.
I'm not going to throw a small town cowboy at you if you're over here looking for whips and chains.
To help readers find their next fixation, Galt put together a catalog of romance books sorted the same way as her shelves. The Novel Trope Guide features more than 800 titles organized under tropes like But Do They Have Wings? And Bodice Rippers. It's like an adult Scholastic book fair flyer, emphasis on adult. The guide highlights books written by authors of color, stories that are LGBTQ+ oriented, and titles available as audiobooks. Galt ordered 11,000 copies from the printer.
I was like, surely that will be plenty. We'll have enough for events next year. Like, it'll last us 6 months. That was not a good estimation.
She says requests for the guide kept rolling in. Bookstores all over the world wanted it.
It exploded.
Demand for the locally made guide reflects a global trend. Romance fiction is hot. It's the publishing industry's highest-grossing genre, bringing in more than $1 billion every year. And it's growing. Bloomberg reports that general fiction sales have increased by 16% since 2020, while sales of romance fiction have more than doubled. And local communities are getting a piece of the action. Jane Nunakovan runs the website Romancing the Data, where she tracks trends in the global romance fiction industry. She says starting in 2023, the number of brick-and-mortar romance bookstores in the U.S. has doubled or even tripled annually.
Seeing it continue at a pretty high rate has been pretty surprising to me.
She wonders if the pace of growth is sustainable. One reason she's optimistic?
Because they're really building those community networks and roots, it makes me hopeful that the stores can have longevity.
When Galt opened Novel Grounds in Chesapeake in 2023, it was the first physical bookstore dedicated to romance writing in Virginia. Now there are 3, 2 of which are in Hampton Roads. Galt says the region loves romance. Its large military population could have something to do with it.
We have a lot of people like myself who spend a lot of time without our spouses, and romance helps give you that hug that you aren't getting from somebody else.
The genre's popularity isn't new. Hampton Roads romance author Janice Sun says romance has been the backbone of the publishing industry for decades, but people weren't vocal about reading it.
It used to be like, oh, you're reading a romance, you're not reading a real book.
Local romance reader Donna Stowers was browsing the witchy romance section at Novel Grounds. She says she resisted the genre for years due to the stigma.
I was like, oh, nobody can know that I am into reading those kinds of books.
But she says social media has diminished the shame around reading romance. Now she reads what she wants. Proudly.
It's a nice little escape from everything else in real life.
As attitudes towards the genre shift and sales skyrocket, local communities are responding. Corinne Michaels is a best-selling romance author who got her start in Virginia Beach. She says a decade ago, there was no local support system for indie romance writers, or romance readers for that matter. She says local romance bookstores, like Novel Grounds, have made a big difference.
It's really cool to see the evolution of it. But back then, it was very different. It was very lonely. It was very isolating.
Michaels says these bookstores have become hubs for romance readers and writers. She says she's excited to see more book signing and author events at local bookshops in 2026. Galt has a few already lined up at Novel Grounds. She hopes the events and the trope guide invite more readers into the local romance community. Toby Cox, WHRO News.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Yi-Ching Wang, Toby Cox, Michelle Hankerson, Nick McNamara, Catherine Hefner, and John Doucette.
VCIJ's Kunle Fali, WVTF's Sandy Hausman and Michael Pope, and VPM's Jad Khalil and Kiris Mansonaris. Also Connor Worley, who produced today's show. A reminder that you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed.
You can get your news updates at WHRO.org and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Barry Graham.
And I'm Jordan Christie. Have a great weekend.